Welcome, welcome, welcome everybody to another edition of Hot Program. I am your host with the most, all the way from the East Coast. And as always, I am in airplane mode. And now a man who says the language barrier is no barrier at all. A man who needs no introduction. How you doing today, my black friend?
I am doing well. Thank you, Pocket Locker. And yourself?
I'm good. I'm good. It's good to
Excellent.
see the gang gathering in the chat. Um, so yeah, I'm doing well.
hmm
Today's video is about why Jesus's resurrection was probably invented. So I guess the big question is, do you think Jesus's resurrection was invented?
I am a believer that pretty much the entire Jesus story was invented.
Oh yeah, you
I
think Jesus was invented?
yeah, I don't think he was a historical guy. And my perspective includes if he was a historical guy, the best evidence for that is, in my view, Revelation and the Gospel of John. Um, which taken apart or together offer us the ridiculous. But I think if somebody, as Christopher Hitchens said, he comments about the fakery of the story, how they just keep trying to make it work. I think that's a really solid point. Like one person is covering up another, but if we were to go through the Bible from the beginning to the end, we would see how things changed. How it seems like somebody was picking up a story where someone else left off. I mean, even scholars acknowledge that. So I think for that sort of thing, I think that could happen with the Gospels as well. The
So he was a historicist though. Like he believed Jesus was real because he said that that they were trying to cover something up, right? That they keep going
right,
out of their way to fix stuff. Yeah.
yeah. So for him, I think that's a really brilliant, remarkable point. Um, but they don't need to be that smart. Not necessarily. Not in my opinion. I think a lot of it. Look, there's this. I think it's in Diodorus Siculus or Herodotus, where they talk about a story that was clearly made up by a writer, but when people saw it performed, they couldn't believe it wasn't true.
Mm.
The fiction was so good that they thought it was true. Look, some equivalent of some college guys um, back in Jesus's day could have made the whole story up.
Yeah, and
And
then there could have been a correction of the made up story for
oh,
theological
dude,
reasons.
they could have. I was in an improv troupe. They could have been an improv troupe going from place to place, and then they saw how. Look, all it takes is you have a group of actors, let's say, right, who have no intention of being con men and women, but they do this live performance and they pass the hat or whatever the hell they had back then. They pass that around to get some donations. But all it takes is one audience to be moved so enough that when they, after the performance over, they walk up to the performers and they start asking questions about this Jesus character. And if you get this reaction a few times and you humor those people by pretending it's true, they start to tell other people, and your marketing is done for you to a small degree. And if they realize we can make some money off this, just like in my opinion in the Old Testament, hey, bring your money to the temple. Bring your money to the temple. What? Yeah, just come on, bring it to the temple. And as I've commented here before, in 70 AD, when the Romans raided the temple in Jerusalem, they had so much treasure from that they practically built a Colosseum in Rome with the money. As I'm fond of saying, Pocket Locker, God never keeps a dime. All of it, all of it, all of it, or almost all of it. The Bible could be an elaborate scam to make money off people who are very credulous. We see it today. Joel Osteen is not a poor man. You know, a lot of these other mega church ministers like Creflo Dollar, they're not poor people. So I think that's all it took.
So yeah,
We could just catch
I
fire.
think we somebody asked if we do call. I think we've always wanted to call
Yes,
in, but you know,
yes.
we don't typically have like believers or
Yeah, we have we
people
have we have
who
our
want to come
faithful,
talk to us.
the hot program faithful,
Yeah.
who tune in
Yeah.
and enjoy our show with us. But if we could, I'd love to have somebody call in.
If you know somebody that wants to hop on and talk to us, that would be fantastic. Let us
Yeah.
know.
And though we may disagree, this is not a place where you're going to get beat up for your thoughts and opinions, on
So
theology.
so question I have for you, I don't know if you have an answer to this, but uh do you think the story, the character of Jesus would have been made up without the resurrection story? Like, do you think like he was made, like, because I'm thinking of it now, like if you're a Christian now and you don't believe in Jesus' resurrection, we effectively say you're not a Christian anymore, right?
Yeah, that's right. You're supposed
So
to believe it's part of
so
the
do you think
Lord.
that was an essential part of the story from day one, such that almost Jesus is a story created of a savior who rose from the dead, or do you think he was made up already and then he ended
I
up with this detail
yeah,
later?
I totally think he was made up from the start. But look, let's take it in chunks, right? I used to write screenplays. So, when it comes to creativity, my mind still enjoys a good story. So let's take it in parts. Let's take the resurrection comes later. All you need, think of how our politicians, when they're giving speeches, think of how they answer questions. They make up an answer on the spot. All you need is someone saying, "Oh yes, he was raised from the dead as well." He was? Well, tell us about that. Notice from story to story in the Gospels, the details aren't the same. It's not the same
Mm,
reporting. If there was a fire in a building downtown in your state, the news trucks will show up and they'll say almost the same things. Some of them might get to talk to the chief. The chief talks to 5 outlets. He'll say almost the same things. It won't be only 2 women came to the tomb and they were told not to tell anybody, or they didn't tell anybody, right? Because obviously we have all these other
sure.
accounts of the story. So again, I did improv on stage for years and it was a blast. We literally would get a suggestion from the audience and make the rest up.
So you think he always had that detail or story?
Not it doesn't need to be that way. It may be that way, Pocket Locker, but it's not necessary.
Not necessary.
Just
Okay.
like just like all these accounts, um, a monk, when he's translating this stuff or whatever, could add his own thoughts and opinion. We know in the Gospel of John, right? The woman taken in adultery, that story doesn't appear until, what is it, the 3rd century or 4th century in the manuscripts. So was it original and then gotten taken out? Or did it come later? The story is a great story. I would argue it's one of the best stories about confronting hypocrisy in the Bible, but it's not original to the manuscripts that we have that are the oldest.
Right.
So does it deserve to be there? Technically, no. Is it better than a lot of other things that are in there? Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, it's hard to say what belongs there because I think the Bible is a document that's changed so much over time that it's almost in a genre where it's meaningless to say what the original is, right? Because
Hmm.
it's got like, it's got all these if we were to take the most, I don't know, the most basal form at which we would start to say the Bible's a Christian text, right? it would
Mm-hmm.
already have been certain stories were in, certain stories were not. There's all these stories adopted from the, the previous religion or current religion, whatever, like from Judaism, right? But then those
Mm-hmm.
stories would have been borrowed from previous religions. So it's hard to say what's like, what would be the original, because you're setting an arbitrary cutoff point of just how far back you want to go. And also some things could have been, I mean, I don't want to sound like an apologist, but some interpolations could technically be corrections. We always treat them as though they were adding stuff that wasn't originally there. They could be adding stuff that was originally there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that, but it's possible, right? I don't know, right? And I don't have a particular horse in the race, but that is possible, where, somebody writes Darwin's story and they talk about how his wife was a Christian and da 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 da. And they
Yeah.
go, well, she was also like his second cousin. And they go, oh, no, I didn't know that. Let's put that in there. I'm not adding something that isn't true. I'm just filling in
Here's
a
another
detail that
fact.
may not
Here's
have
another
been
fact.
there
Mm-hmm.
originally. I think it's interesting to ponder where the resurrection story came from. Again, I think it's probably an unanswerable question, but it's interesting in the sense of the definition of what it meant to be a Christian. Because if it was always there, then you start to to consider maybe that's been the essence of the Jesus character from the beginning, and why? Like why did he need to be this dying and rising Messiah? Why these particular details? And what is it that made that you know, I guess revolutionary to these people, or really got them believing something they hadn't believed before? Whereas if it wasn't, then you have sort of an interesting development question of how did it go from, belief in a Jesus who was elected by God, yada, 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 and then morph into this faith where believing in the resurrection is sort of the cornerstone of identifying as a Christian.
I would like to address that. You've heard me say on Hot Program before, I think Revelation, the book of Revelation, was written before the Gospels.
Yeah.
I totally do. I can't see it another way now after reading Revelation so much and the other Gospels so much. I'm like, wait a second. This is the cart before the horse. Certainly, the books in the Gospels aren't in chronological order. Why do I think Revelation came before the others? Because Revelation talks about things that happened in the Gospels. Now, that isn't to say that Revelation doesn't rehash stuff from like Ezekiel and Enoch and other books in the Bible, because it does. It
Right.
totally does. It's almost like somebody just had other. The way I romanticize it, if you will, is it seems to me that it could be Jesus talking to John about the end times. Now, when I say John, I mean John the Baptist, because you will recall John the Baptist asked Jesus at some point, are you the one we're expecting? Or are you someone else? Like, look, are you really the guy? Because
Yeah.
Revelation makes all these promises about the end time. I think it's hilarious that in 2023, there are people who think Jesus's minions are coming back with him and they're going to be on horses. Really?
Right. Right.
They're not going to be in like a Hummer H3 or whatever the new one's called. I don't know what the hell they call it.
Yeah.
They're not going to be driving that. They're just going to be on horseback, huh? Are they going to stop to feed the horses? Do the horses get hungry? Am I going to
Right.
have to come along with my pitchfork and scoop up their poop like I used to do? You know, it. I think it's ridiculous to look at it as something that's factual that could happen in our times. I think that's ridiculous. But in their times, if you go into like Zechariah, it's clear they expect the end to come soon. Revelation, the book of Revelation, gives us that imagery. Babylon is fallen. Babylon is fallen. Think of it. Like, are they talking about now? No, they're talking about back then. They're supposed to watch Babylon fall in Jesus's time, not ours, right? So, to me, that's a thing. I think Jesus was expecting more and got less. You can view the stories about him on the cross from different ways. Is he now seeing himself as a failure? I said to you before Hot Program started a couple of weeks ago, hey, Jesus is on the cross. Today you'll be with me in paradise. Well, paradise, the old meaning of paradise is a walled garden. They'll be dead. They'll be in the cemetery. It's not like they'll be in heaven snow skiing up there and eating fresh bread with butter. No, they're dead. It's that simple. But if you want to play it up to where it's glorious, oh my gosh, they'll be in God's glorious kingdom together, enjoying the fruits of salvation. Okay, you can say that too.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's the case.
Yeah.
I can't see what Senior Cinema says. Hold on, maybe I can.
Yeah, I don't believe in I don't believe in the supernatural at all. Matter of fact, supernatural occurrences tend to make me think a story's just flat out not true. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, you know, I don't think anyone's ever risen from the dead. I don't think anyone's ever been born to a virgin. I mean, these for me are like foundational. Everything we know about the reality is wrong if those things have happened even once.
Now, Pocket Locker, we've seen a man rise from the dead here on Hot Program. We watched the video. I'm not gonna let you have that. I gotta correct you.
Oh man.
But there is I'm trying to find the name of it. I think it's not the Gospel of Elijah, I don't think. But there's a book that talks about Elijah the prophet, and it's an apocryphal book. Gospel. I listened to the audiobook of it. I haven't read a paper copy. But it talks about the light coming into the world. We can read in the Gospels left and right that Jesus is supposed to be the light coming into the world. So if this was written before him or after him, I'd have to re-listen to know or reread it to know. Bible story of Elijah. That's not it.
Yeah, I think so, Uncle Bobby. Like as soon as we know something happened in reality, it becomes part of the natural world. Yeah. It's more to say that we don't think these things have ever happened in the natural world. Yeah. But as soon as somebody that's the problem, right? As soon as somebody rises from the dead for real, and I don't mean that like medical dead, you know, your brain stopped for a few minutes or you stop breathing for a while. I mean, you know, 2-3 days dead. Dead no longer means dead, right? Like that's it, you know, if you can get pregnant without having coitus in a sexually reproducing species, we are no longer by definition a sexually reproducing species, and we've got to go back to the drawing board as far as our biology is concerned. So yeah.
Back to the drawing board with a magazine. But the book I'm referring to is The Apocalypse of Elijah. And it's very interesting to get these old apocryphal Christian texts and I guess biblical related texts to see how other people thought about it, because what is taught and preached to us is just pretty much the Bible. And occasionally someone will tell you a little bit about the history of the time, to give you a window into it, to understand what it's like. I think going back to the topic, I just think it's too easy to make the story up. Look, Apollo, the stories about Apollo are made up. The stories about Isis and Ra are made up. The stories about Hera are made up. The stories about Mercury, they're made up. So now there's this one guy who is totally legit and walking around healing people and promises other Christians that that's true. They can heal people too, right? They can drink deadly poison and not be harmed and take up serpents. Look, we can test this today.
Yeah.
It's not even I'm not trying to be insulting. It's not even hard to know that you cannot walk up to people, lay hands on them, and heal. So maybe some of the other things this guy said, this Jesus fellow, assuming he's 100% real, right?
Yeah.
He's 100% historical. Maybe he was a liar.
Yeah, and notice how they only
And
they only even try the laying on of hands and all of that in the church, right? Like where they're already in the sanctity of the suspension of disbelief of the
oof,
congregation, right? Um, and
mhm.
not to say that it works there, right? But they at least that's where they play out the ritual. Imagine a Christian going up to a coworker in the office place who's just been diagnosed with something and saying, "Oh well, I'm gonna lay hands on you, and we're gonna take care of that in the name of Jesus." I mean, they wouldn't do it, you know.
Look, we have the Center for Disease Control down in Atlanta. If I went to them and said, "Would you be willing to fund just experimental funding, whatever you could give?" I know there's a separation of church and state, but I have someone who says he can heal people. Now, this is a religious person. He requires sort of a religious atmosphere to do so. I need money so we can fly him around and get him hotels. If they said, "Fine, we'll give you 5 grand," because technically we're not supposed to give you anything for this, and we want to see, and then I take them to whatever church my cousins go to down there in Atlanta and say, "Okay, do your stuff, buddy." Let's say the guy's name is Rocky, whatever. I needed a name. So Rocky stands up, he says a few words to the congregation, and they start wheeling in the sick and infirm. And left and right, Rocky is healing them. Left and right. And it's true transformation. The blind see, the deaf hear, the lame get up and walk. Maybe Rocky goes through like 600 people in an evening. How hard would it be for them to give me millions of dollars to take Rocky around and heal people?
I mean, yeah, we'd probably be done with diseases by now, and
Well, and look, Jesus is saying he's given his disciples the power. Well, aren't there disciples of Christ today?
yeah,
Aren't,
I almost think we're there. I mean, we've definitely done formal studies of prayer. Prayer doesn't work. Do not rely on prayer for anything. Um, but I think it's more about the secular people than it is about the religious people. For me, I don't know what we can do about religious people. I mean, in some sense, they're kind
love
of
them. That's it.
yeah, but in a practical sense, I mean, they're off the rate. They're gone. They're off the reservation. They can come back. I don't know how to bring them back. What I think it should say to the rest of us, though, is let's put it to them with what we really know. Like this, I would love to see the cognitive dissonance in action. Listen, Christian, this just isn't true. It doesn't work. We tested it. It's not real. It's not real. It isn't true. It's not real. Okay, well, I still believe it anyway. I believe Jesus can do anything. I believe all things in Christ who strengthens me. Okay, now what are the rest of us gonna do? Because I almost think we're there. It's hard to say this as a former believer because I used to believe, but I actually believe we're at a time when we know the claims of religions are false. We just know religions are not true. Where we're not, though, is we're not at a place where we're willing to bring that hard truth to believers and then we're willing to move on without them. And I actually think that that's the place we need to get to, right? Like you could because to me it's a total delusion. So you like let's imagine you have a friend. You know, I have some friends who are schizophrenic, right?
Mm-hmm.
When they're having an episode and they're experiencing things that the rest of us are not experiencing, you still care about them, you still love them,
Excuse me.
but you
Mm-hmm.
know they're in a place that you can't work with them right now. Like, you know, they're not going to be able to, you know, make the best choices right now. I mean, they're really convinced there's stuff going on, right? And there comes a point where you have to accept that they're having delusions right now. And then, you know, those of us that are fortunately not having those delusions have to go on and do what's best based on what we know to be really going on. And I think
Mm-hmm.
we're at that place with Christianity, but we're not at that place with Christians. We're at a place where we're still humoring all of this because we're not ready to deal with the social division it will cause. But I think we have to, because I don't think Christians are ever going to give up Christianity without sort of the forcefulness I've been realizing lately. And I think I think even those who you try to take a more forceful approach are still going to double down. And then I was listening to Seth Andrews, the Thinking Atheist. He was describing to a caller how difficult it can be to deal with family who still believe and don't respect your boundaries. And sometimes, you know, those relationships kind of deteriorate as a result. And the one thing he kept saying to the person was, you know, you have to realize that's not your fault.
Yeah.
And he talked about, you know, not having a great relationship with his mother anymore. He doesn't really talk to her because, you know, of that situation. It's like, I don't know what the solution is because I can't even figure it out with my own mom, but, you know, it is what it is. And he said, you know, it's not my fault. And I have a similar struggle with my family. And what I'm getting at is they're participating in something that's crazy. It is really delusional and it is antisocial. And it isn't
Mm-hmm.
our fault to realize that it's delusional and it's antisocial. That's actually what the world demanded of us. Like for us to get through life as best we can, we had to like I even put it to you like this. Y'all, I'm bipolar. I have to take 7 pills a day to try to keep the brain chemistry in a reasonable balance. I
Mm-hmm.
have actually lost my freedom because as a result of my brain chemistry not being properly regulated.
Mm-hmm.
My friends, like I said, I have friends who suffer from you know, schizophrenia and schizoatypical type conditions. Same thing. So for us, it's been a matter of life and death. It's been a matter of securing your ability to live free as an independent adult, that you have to keep both feet firmly planted in reality. You got to regulate your stuff. You got to see the doctor. You got to take your medication. You got to go to counseling. You got to pay the bills. You got to go to work. You got to do all that stuff, and you can't play with it. There are real consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, you know, it was necessary. It was necessary to really to like live in the truth. And sometimes I just have to accept that, like, it's not my fault that other people have decided that they have different priorities and that they've to this point been able to live like that. You know, like you can't put it all on yourself. But yeah, I'm kind of there personally. I'm trying to push that needle a little bit forward, because I think that's what we need to do to normalize atheism and to really fight back against religion. I even think it's kind of a big divide in this atheist content creating space. I think some of us are really here to build atheist community, to have other atheist friends, to kind of vent, to have some good laughs at the expense of apologists. But I think for people like me, there's a real legitimate urgency to try to fight back against religion. It's, you know, there's sort of a mission here, in addition to you know, just the community, and not everybody's there, and that's totally fine. It's just that's where I'm at, you know.
Well, my approach is very different than yours,
Sure, of
obviously.
course.
You said that it's totally delusional. I'm going to just religion, right? Christianity, for instance, totally delusional, maybe. I can't say totally, because the love that people feel for God, for Jesus, is real. It's as real as the love your mother has for you.
But we
Her
would, but
love
see,
for
that
Jesus.
what's weird is we wouldn't grant that to other people with delusions, right? So like, if I like, that's kind of what I meant, like having friends like this, like, because I have friends who calls and he says, I think the police are following me.
But that's different.
Why is that how? Yeah, that's what I'm understanding. How is
Because
that different?
that's not an emotion. Your friend is stating as a fact that the police are following him. So let's say it's not true, right?
But it's an emotion because he's really scared. He's really worried.
No, the fear is real.
Sure, okay.
The fear is real. So let's equate that now, okay? Let's bring it to what I said. The God, we can't prove that God is real. Or we don't know how to, right? This Bible is insufficient for that. It's insufficient for that.
Right.
So the love your mother, or whoever, my mother, right, has, that connects her to God, is real. Even though if there was, let's just say as a fact, if we could state as a fact, there isn't a God. Let's say we somehow researched it properly and perfectly. There is no God. Not this God either. It doesn't exist. But they don't know that. Their feelings don't change. I remember learning in psychology class in college, the village shaman can heal his people in places like where the Yanomamo Indians live, you know. In Native American tribes, in African tribes, the shaman can successfully heal their people. But if you gave them a pill, right, from Briggs Myers Squibb or whatever the heck it's called, if you gave them a pill from them to fix the same thing, it won't work. He said they literally studied this, and it was supposed to heal the same thing, and it didn't. Because their belief system, unlike mine, he takes many pills, didn't include that pill working. When the shaman says, drink this potion, that shaman might be relying on 1,500 years of experimentation with the shaman before him to come up with this concoction. And if you and I took it, it may do nothing. But it seems to work for those people because they've been hearing it did their whole lives, right? Or it actually has a medicinal value. One of the two is true. So if what the study said is true in its entirety, right? Those people need their solutions to solve their problems, and the shaman is going to know some of those solutions. And they're enculturated, just like, right? Our Christian friends and family are enculturated to believe that prayer is going to work. That prayer is going to resolve things. And as I've said on Facebook, if you cross out prayer and you put time, it seems to still work.
So I'm gonna give you a hot take. I think, and I'm speaking just for me. I actually think we have disproved God. There's a couple videos I want to make. This is one of them. So I'll give you guys just a preview. I just think there's layers to it, right? So the first layer would sort of be nothing about our empirical model works as though there's a God. Like, we've built this incredibly reliable model of reality, right? It lets us make medicines, it lets us have the internet, it lets us travel to other planets. I mean, it's crazy. And nothing, not a single shred of that requires a supernatural entity. Like that's crazy. If people really think about that, nothing, not a single scientific fact suggests that there's a God model in all of the universe of facts that we've come up with. The second thing is, we have not found evidence where there should be evidence. In other words, almost more than most scientific theories, religious people have been motivated to find the evidence for their claims, to go show us where the burning bush was, go find Sodom and Gomorrah, go dig up Noah's Ark, go find the burial place of Jesus, all that, right? All of those have come up empty. Right? So you now are layering sort of this negative evidence on top of that. Then on top of that, all the evidence seems to suggest that humans made this up. Like, there's really good evidence that almost every God we point to and go, why do people believe in that God? Well, there's a story, well, there's a book over here. Well, this tradition was passed down from right? So again, all of that is another layer to me of evidence that this is all made up. So I actually think when you piece together enough of this, you start to get a really strong case. It's not what people want in terms of a positive empirical case, like that there's no God, but people should stop looking for that. That's not possible. Right? That's not possible. So are we going to really set a standard for making a conclusion that's impossible? That doesn't make any sense. Everything else in the world, we have to make conclusions based on what we can possibly understand. So to me, like, to keep holding that bar out there, like maybe one day, like, no, science doesn't even, there is no way to do science or science that there could even be to test that claim. So we've got to take that off the table as the bar you have to meet before you conclude that there's no God. And most of us have. I just think if we really looked at all the empirical stuff we have enough. It's not something I'd want to say at a department meeting, because it'd start I'd have a bunch of nuisance emails and stuff like that. But it's to a point where if we're 99.9% there and there's no God, all we're gonna keep doing is adding nines, 0.9999. We're just gonna keep it, but we're not gonna get any more meaningfully realistic model of reality than we have now. That's going to add too much. So I just think we have enough that we would say, no, I can pretty confidently conclude that there's no God. Not saying that you can demonstrate it, but I think you can conclude it. All right. That's my hot take. Let's go ahead and get
okay. Well, let me.
Go ahead.
So for Christians who watch this, if I were to say, if the Christian God is real, then this is some post-it notes. If I let go of it, it won't drop to the ground. Before I challenge God to this, I'm just gonna do it. So it fell to the floor.
Fell even more than you wanted it to.
Even more than I wanted it to. It didn't fall through the floor, thank you. What would that prove? So okay, I'm gonna drop it onto the desk here. Now, if 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 Christians, this is for you and your God. If the Christian God is real, a simple proof would be to cause this post-it note to levitate and be filled with the Gospel of John in miniature in purple pen, purple ink, right?
Float the note.
So it shouldn't be too hard because that God created the balance of the universe in a single day, other than Earth, right? He created the rest of the universe in a single day. So, and all of its processes, by the way. So it shouldn't be hard. Now, there'll be some Christians who will say, well, you shouldn't test God. Now, let's just think about that. The Bible says, you're not supposed to put God to the test. But isn't it strange that if I had an answer, if I knew the truth, and I thought I could lose something if I told you the truth, right? I might lose my station in life. I might lose my power. I might lose my car keys. I might lose a bed. I might lose a poker game, whatever. If I just was honest and told the truth, I would discourage you from asking about it. I would discourage you from really seeking it, right? And I would tell you something else is the truth and make it perfectly okay to seek that, and there'll be rewards when you do. But the Christian God, all you have to do, complete Gospel of John in purple handwriting in miniature, written on these post-it notes, and it'll levitate if you're real. That's all I need to prove it. I can prove it to hundreds of millions of people, if not billions of people, if that would just happen. Let's see. Let's see if it does. Okay. So here's my desk. It even fell to the floor again. Let's
Mm.
see if that gospel is written on it. No tricks. Look at that. No tricks. I didn't do any. I didn't do any shenanigans. There's no shenanigans. It's not written on there. I'll put that close. It's not written on there so small you can't read it. And look, I even was offering some assistance. I had a Bible on my desk too. Didn't even have to memorize anything. Could have just copied the whole thing, but it didn't happen. Why would the God of the universe, the Christian God, let's say, why would that God not do that simple thing to save billions of people? Why? Is it not worth it? Does he not want people who need a sign? Wasn't Jesus essentially a sign? Didn't he
Also,
come to seek and
yeah,
save the lost?
exactly. Also, I was gonna say,
So
notice how they only say you shouldn't test God when they're asked to pony up some evidence to prove
that's what I'm
God.
saying.
When they're in church, and our last video we were talking about pornography, they'll say, well, why don't you try Jesus? Why don't you test him out? Why don't you
Is
see what
Jesus
see what
doing
he will do?
porn?
Why don't you see what he will do for you? They always are encouraging you to test God. And of course, God helped them find their car keys, and you need to rely on Jesus, and then you'd be prosperous. And if you really trusted him more, he'd help heal you. So it's definitely talking out of both sides of their mouth, I think, on that one.
Yeah, I think Christians have it hard because I can offer a simple example. God believers, period, have it hard because I can offer a simple example like that. And the result is, before I'm finished explaining what I want, they already know it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
There's a video I saw where a Christian, maybe somebody debating Dan Barker, was challenged to drink deadly poison or whatever, and they wouldn't do it. They just wouldn't do it.
Right.
No, 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 no. I'm like, wait. And I would never want someone to hurt themselves with something like that. So I like the laying on hands example, because what more beautiful thing could you do than healing someone who's been sick for years or their
Right.
whole life? What more liberating thing could you do? And yet they don't have the power. But the Bible says they should. It says they will, those who follow me, right? Let's see, where's that at? It's the end of the Gospel of Mark. I got to mark my page here. Now, I will now use a post-it note from my stack to mark my place in the Gospel of John, chapter 20. Go to the end of March, chapter 16, where we will be disappointed to find that Jesus totally lied. Now, some will say, and I give them this, the oldest manuscripts of Mark don't have this in there, but it's printed in the Bibles. Just like this woman taken in adultery, the oldest manuscripts don't have that in there. What is happening here? My pages are so thin, just like some of the arguments made in the Bible. So thin. All right, so let's see. Mark chapter 16, verse 15 through what do we got? 20. I'll read it. He said to them, "Go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation. Whoever believes and is baptized will be saved, but whoever does not believe will be condemned. And these signs, this is important, and these signs will accompany those who believe. In my name, they will drive out demons. They will speak in new tongues. They will pick up snakes with their hands. And when they drink deadly poison, it will not hurt them at all. They will place their hands on sick people and they will get well." After the Lord Jesus had spoken to them, he was taken up into heaven and he sat at the right hand of God. Then the disciples went out and preached everywhere, and the Lord worked with them and confirmed his word by the signs that accompanied it.
Yeah, and
Bull
so
crap.
that's yeah,
Bull
exactly.
crap.
And it's funny that that's how they reason about the Bible, that like it's true because the Bible says it's true. And look, the Bible provides an example of when it actually happened. But I want you to read the first two verses, I guess, of that again.
Sure. Mark 16, chapter 16, verse 15. He said to them, "Go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation. Whoever believes and is baptized will be saved, but whoever does not believe will be condemned." Those are the first two. When we go
All
to the
right,
next one?
no, that's it. That's where we want to stop. That is the message I need the atheist in the audience to hear. Whoever does not believe shall be condemned. Because we have this tendency to act like atheist is our favorite flavor cream cheese. Like it's just some preference that there's no consequence to. That really Christians love us and they embrace us and they'd be happy to just live alongside us. I really think, because there's plenty of other examples of language like that throughout the book, that we have to look at it similar to the way they treat LGBTQ people. They hate us because the book tells them to hate us, and trust me, they hate us. There is a culture war going on. It definitely has our queer community at the tip of the spear. But if we legitimately had a more public movement to normalize atheism, to normalize not belief, to really say, no, we actually do want a government that is secular, that actually takes the separation of church and state seriously. I just don't know who is under the delusion that we would not see an amplification of the culture war. In other words, if you think they lose their mind when you tell them you have a same-sex partner, tell them you don't think God is real and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
So I just need atheists to hear that and understand. That is why I'm telling you, we are a marginalized population. They are coming after us, and they're gonna do the same exact thing. They're gonna go, no, 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 no. My book says right here, those who don't believe shall be condemned. Make sure you ban all those atheist books from the library. I do not want atheists talking to my children. I mean, like, I just just please don't be under the delusion, gang, that Christians are somehow atheist accepting. It's just we're like cats and dogs. We just ain't gonna be able to play nice together.
Well, what it doesn't say is those who don't believe will be condemned by you. It
Oh
doesn't
yeah, of
say
course.
it doesn't say those who don't believe should be condemned by you. It doesn't say that. So the persecution, the prejudice that atheists get from Christians and other religious folk, it just shouldn't be there. I think what would be better is an understanding. Look, we don't agree about this topic, so you can't push your values on me. You can't. It's okay for you. I'm a I'm a person who is for abortion rights. Let's say I have my myriad reasons for it, but it's not up to me to tell somebody else they can't have an abortion unless that's my child. Then I have a say. If I had a daughter who is facing that, right? She gets, let's say she's 14, she gets pregnant. It is not my place to not tell her, or to tell her to have her child or not. I would be extremely supportive for her going ahead and having the baby. But if she wanted to have an abortion, I wouldn't stop her. I'd drive her to the abortion clinic because she's the one looking at her life, deciding, I think this is going to go bad real fast if I have this baby.
Right.
No matter how many nieces and sorry, I have a lot of nieces and nephews, and so the baby would have a lot of people who could pitch in, and help with the baby. The daycare situation wouldn't be an issue. She'd have family members, or he'd have family members that the baby could stay with, or me or my wife. The support system would be there. So it isn't that. It's just maybe that's not what she wants for her life. It's not up to me. So I think if religious people adopted that belief that any punishment due to any other human being for not enjoying my beliefs as I do, for not sharing the beliefs as I do, that's going to be up to God. And any God worth the faith should not tell a human being, well, I want you to kick that person's butt because they don't believe in me. Pocket locker and my one black friend insulted me, hurt my feelings. So I want you to go over there and attack them. Oh, what kind of crap is that?
So I
How's that
think there's
person going to feel to live with that they committed violence? Go
I
ahead.
think I think there's somebody in our chat that's maybe a Muslim or something. Like they're I don't know, but the Muslim apologetics is just so far behind. They said like if sin isn't real, then there's no good, or there's no love, or what is our definition of what is it? How do we define good? What is your
Can you put? Oh,
criteria?
thank you.
These
And
are these are
please
just
put
the
these comments on the screen.
okay. I was just gonna say that there's just no just welcome to the game. This is like
Yeah,
you're new, you're new around here, you're a
but
rookie. Just keep
but
learning, keep growing, because it's just these are just not good. It just shows
well,
like these are not good
but
questions.
I like that question. So what is good? I'll talk about that, right?
I
So
don't. I
rather,
think they know what good is.
but what this person may be trying to do is understand where we're coming from, because we don't have. And by the way, I don't know what the name was. Something services. Feel free to speak for yourself. Okay, I don't need to talk for you. You obviously have a voice and you can voice it. Okay, and please feel free to put that in the comment section. Your response, or you can call in. What is good? Typically, good is advancing the prosperity, health, and well-being without doing harm amongst people, other beings like otters and seals and the environment. That's doing good. We're advancing the prosperity. My neighbor, she's at a point where she's feeling rather sickly. And I wrote to her family and I said, I'm going to take out her trash cans. So she doesn't have to walk her 88-year-old self out there feeling a bit frail. And I know she gets winded going to her mailbox even. She does not have to take out her trash cans, her yard waste. I'll do that. Some would say I'm doing good when I do that. I'm advancing her cause, her prosperity. She can continue to enjoy her day knowing that she doesn't have to suffer because I'm willing to do this. She just bought a stove. If I were to say, hey, I'm going to pay for your stove, oh, me and your daughter, we'll pay for it. I know you paid part of it. I'm giving you your money back. I'll pay for that stove along with your daughter. I'm doing something that's good because I'm helping her have a life that is more one of
I
ease.
I
Let me give
think.
another
Go ahead.
example. Let me give another example. So the project I was on just abruptly ended. They don't want to continue. So now I have an assistant that is superb. If I want to do some good towards my assistant, I could either say, hey, let's give her another 2 weeks payout, or I can say to many people I know, look, I had this amazing assistant and I'll steal her from you the first chance I get, but I want to recommend her. And I help recommend her for jobs before she even sends her resume, right? I start making calls to people I know. Hey, I got this person. I have this person. She's extraordinary. And she's my first hire when I did this project. I told her when she worked for me last year, you will be the first person I hire when I get a project where I have a bigger staff. And she was. So if I can do that in my circle of influence, if you will, and help someone find her who needs her and help her find a job, both of those people could say I've done good because I've connected people with a common need and a common availability, and now both parties are satisfied. One has an amazing employee, the other has work.
I would
So
say.
those are good. Go ahead.
I would just say you're a much nicer human being than I am, because I would say the person trying to have this conversation is not on the level. They're just sorry. You're just not ready for the big leagues. You're not ready to sit at the adults table. You need to go
Well,
over there at the
look,
kids table. And I'm just being honest. I
well,
I
if
have
all they
similar.
want to tell me is there is no good without Allah, right? If that's all they want to tell me, I'm not going to agree because if the Allah is clearly the Bible's God. This God, most of what has occurred in human history is not discussed within the pages of the Torah or the prophets or the law. Most of what occurred in human history is not there. You know, a mother. I'll use an example. I heard Salma Hayek say it sounded so beautiful when she says it. She saw, I think it was her mother or grandmother, breastfeed a starving child that wasn't related to them and thought like this was a beautiful act of kindness. It is. And Allah had nothing to do with it. Allah wasn't standing there saying, you know, you're still producing milk. Why don't you feed that starving baby there?
But this is what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. You're nicer than I am, because I would not spend 5 minutes of my life explaining to a grown person what good means. Think about it. If I have a meeting with my advisor, we're sitting PhD to PhD, we're talking about a manuscript. The goal is to get this manuscript published in a scientific journal after it goes through peer review. And he says, "Yeah, man, I think the paper is good, but I'd like us to work on improving this opening paragraph because I think the opening paragraph is bad, given the goals of the paper."
Mm-hmm.
Now, imagine if I sat up there and said, "Well, what do you mean by good? What is your criteria? What do you mean by
But
bad?"
okay,
This is
but
just
wait,
my point
you're
is just that we
I know
no,
analogies are
they're
hard.
playing no. My point is they're playing games and we shouldn't play them. We shouldn't play them. We should not pretend that a
Laka.
person genuinely doesn't understand what the word good means. because they do. And if they don't, they're just not, they're not ready. Most of our audience is 25 plus. This is conversations for grown folks. When you come around acting like you don't know what we mean by good and bad, come on, man. Because it's playing the game to take us to, if there's no sin, there's no like. It's just it's weak. Let's but yeah, we should. I don't see them responding, so we should get into the.
Okay.
I guess
maybe
it says that
there are other podcasts to reach out to.
I mean, it'd be cool to have a conversation, but you got to come it to have a conversation, because when you start playing this game, you just get into apologetics land.
Well, I figured that's where this person is going. So your definition of good is based on maximizing happiness, well-being.
Hedonism. See, that's what I'm saying. Like,
but
nobody wants to deal with
IE
this.
means id est. That's Latin. Id est. Id est hedonism. I don't think so. Is my neighbor gaining hedonistic pleasure from me taking out her trash cans? No. I'm simply lifting. I can shoulder the burden for her, and so I do it. My mother is wheelchair bound. Someone used to do her shopping for her, right? Someone used to come over to her house and tidy up and do different things that she asked them to in her house. This person did this for free because he was a friend of the family. That sort of thing is good. Raining fire down on your enemies, right? That's kind of awful. Wouldn't it be better to have the right conversations to where you don't have enemies anymore? Not by slaughtering people. Not by slaughtering people. Not an iron fist. But understanding. That's way better. Look at Israel now, right? It's complete turmoil, right? Complete turmoil. What if people knew how to talk to each other? And let's go back a few thousand years. What if the Romans knew how to have a conversation with the Israelites back then? Wouldn't it be better to not go through and kill dang near all of them, enslave a bunch of them, and just leave some farmers behind to take care of the land? You know?
Right.
Who are the ancestors of the Palestinians they're slaughtering off right now. So
all right, let's go ahead and jump into this video so we can get there. It's about 10 minutes long.
Thank you.
Here's a guy to make some unconvincing arguments about why the disciples didn't make up the resurrection.
We know of at least a dozen messianic or prophetic movements between roughly 100 years before Jesus and roughly 100 years after Jesus, ending with the Bar Kokhba revolt in the 130s AD. In each of those cases, the movement ended with the violent death of the founder, as far as we can tell. When that happened, and there are several movements which crop up in the historian Josephus, we can track them, and I've written about these as others have done. When that happened, when the founder dies, the followers have a choice. They can either clear off and forget the movement, this whole kingdom of God idea, we're not going to get into that mess anymore, or they get another leader.
And the latter is exactly what happened with Christianity. After Jesus died, Paul of Tarsus came along and said, I'm in charge of Christianity now. If it hadn't been for Paul, there's little reason to believe that Christianity would have gotten very far.
Going around saying that the original leader has been raised from the dead is not an option, even though if they were loyal Pharisaic Jews, as many of them were, resurrection would be very much in their minds, that that's what we're aiming for, the kingdom of God, the raising of all the dead. But not one person coming back in the middle of history.
Well, the Gospels don't just describe one person coming back. The daughter of Jairus came back, Lazarus came back, and as Christopher Hitchens pointed out,
and the Gospels tell us that at the time of the crucifixion, all the graves in Jerusalem opened, and their occupants wandered around the streets to greet people. So that it seems the resurrection was something of a banality at the time. Not all of those people clearly were divinely conceived.
So if resurrection...
Yeah, this is a really great point by Christopher Hitchens. It just makes all of this feel so silly. It's that I can't believe I used to be a Christian territory. But I just also feel like that guy, I guess John Lennox or whatever, he just has.
NT Wright.
Is that the guy we're listening to in this?
Yeah, he's being interviewed by Justin Brierley. I don't know who the person is cutting in and making the.
Oh yeah, NT Wright. Okay, he has got all of the signs here of the fake academics. First off, like just the. Gang, nobody's reading this many books. Nobody reads. Nobody's read this. This is just the scene, and what a hot mess it is. But yeah, it just bothers me that people like this want to present themselves as these like super intellectual people when they're talking about fairy tales like this. That's all.
History.
That's all. Just
Well, the Gospels don't just describe one, and as Christopher Hitchens
Jerusalem,
All
the
right,
direction
sorry,
was were divine.
followers, because they were apocalypticists who believed that people would be raised from the dead on Judgment Day, which they anticipated to occur shortly after. Perhaps that explains the claims about the resurrection of the daughter of Jairus, the resurrection of Lazarus, and the resurrection of the folks who rose from their graves when Jesus was crucified. And maybe it even explains why they went around saying that Jesus himself rose from the grave. Also, isn't it weird that their leader rose from the grave but then chose not to continue being their leader? Instead, he ascended to heaven. How convenient. After rising from the grave, he only stuck around long enough to show off to people that he could do that sort of thing. And then he peaced out, leaving his disciples leaderless.
Yeah, and also I want to
pause it. No, I'm. You go ahead and make your comment. I'm trying to get my.
I like the Matt.
atheist computer to come to life here.
I like the Matt Dillahunty line about how if any of this is true, then Jesus really just gave up a part of his weekend before he went back to being, the eternal ruler of the universe. And Matt Dillahunty said, I would be willing to go through more and not rise from the dead if it would end human hunger.
Most people would, I would think.
Yeah, and again, although God apparently could just end human hunger without any suffering or any pain or anybody having to endure anything. And apparently Allah could do the same, so most of us are former Christians, but I don't think Islam is in any better standing with regards to its degree of silliness.
Well, my computer is not cooperating right now. You'll remember earlier in our broadcast here, I mentioned that I think Revelation came first. Revelation talks about the two witnesses that will be killed and they will rise from the dead, right? 3 days later, 3.5 days, something like that. They will rise from the dead. Herod thinks that John the Baptist has risen from the dead. Jesus is dead, depending on which account you read, for what, 3 and a bit days? So again, they're making the story fit around the buck that is, in my opinion, they're making the story fit around the buck that is Revelation. They're making it fit that.
Right.
So Jesus coming back, this is the time, right? People will be coming, rising from the grave. Oh, now all these righteous people are coming back. They're being risen out of their grave. The new Jerusalem is supposed to be descending from the sky. The enemies of Israel are going to be wiped out. A further idea that I connect with this is when Paul gets converted, he goes to Arabia. Well, what's in Arabia? Babylon. Well, Revelation talks about Babylon being ended. Maybe he wanted to be there to see it, right? Maybe he left his cloak in Arabia because he keeps forgetting that cloak. I don't know. That's my point. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm eating something because I'm diabetic.
No worries.
And I'm not dying for any of you.
So what does it mean to ascend to heaven? Did Jesus literally levitate vertically into the sky? That sort of implies that heaven is literally a location in space, somewhere above the ground, as though you could get there on a plane or a rocket. I doubt many, if any, Christians believe that to be the case nowadays. So how exactly did Jesus get to heaven by ascending to it?
And I've sometimes fantasized and imagined, say, after the death of Simon Bar Giora, who was the Messiah of the war period, 66 to 70, who the Romans killed at the end of Titus's triumph in Rome in 72. If somebody the next day had said, I think God has raised him from the dead, and his friends might say, what do you mean God has raised him from the dead? And if the person had said, oh, well, he always said that one day there will be a glorious resurrection, so maybe that's happened, then his friends would say, don't be so stupid. They just killed him. We've just buried him. What do you mean he's raised from the dead?
If it's true that resurrection was as much of a banality as the Gospels portray it as being, why would they have that reaction? Could it perhaps be the case that the several purported resurrections in Jerusalem just a few decades prior didn't really happen? If they did happen, then why would people just about 30 years later be so incredulous?
And if somebody at that point would come out with a sort of Bultmannian explanation, oh, well, we have a sense of his presence with us, we have a sense that our sins have been forgiven, they would say, well, maybe he is in some sense present, maybe our sins have been forgiven, but why did you say he's been raised from the dead? That's not what that means. So I think once we start to think historically about what people actually knew, believed, expected, anticipated, and how they reacted as first century Jews, those theories simply fall away, and we're left with this very stark and striking claim, which was stark and striking in the first century as it is.
Okay, and this is where it's baffling to me that these guys work through so much history to justify something that's clearly made up. But also, we don't have this. First off, we don't have this. We don't have the accounts from right after Jesus died. And even in the earliest accounts that we get from decades later, guess what? Guess what? People are doubting it. They are claiming that the apostles have believed cleverly devised myths. That the story was made up. So I don't even know. Like even his own Bible seems to contradict this. And again, who cares? Like in what
cares?
What in what other world is it just do we care whether or not people from thousands of years ago believed in a miraculous claim? I mean, people from that time believed in all sorts of miraculous claims. This is why it was more reasonable to be a Christian then than it is now. Most of these people who are the hardcore Christians in the Bible, and they were all into this stuff, if they were alive today, they would not be believers. They would not be believers. I
wouldn't think so.
They'd be reasonable people, down with science and all that it has done for us. They'd see very little indication of, miraculous and supernatural things happening around us. So it's really weird that Christians in 2023 are using the intellect of people, at the when we switched from BC to AD or whatever, or BC to BCE, they're using them as sort of the proof of concept of their stories, and it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work for anybody who doesn't already believe it.
Well, think of it, if we used cosmology from the first century, the turn of the first century. If we used it from then, there's so much more we understand now. And smartly, there's so much more we know we don't understand now.
Right.
Excuse me. We can see further. We can see better. We've gone to the moon. We've sent probes to different planets in our solar system. We've sent probes. Is Voyager out of the galaxy yet? The Voyagers? I don't know. But whatever, they are way the F out there and sending back data, some of them, if not all of them. I don't know. So we have made great efforts to observe our galaxy that they didn't have access to. None of those things have spotted Jesus or God or an angel. None of them. Though people of that time probably thought, well, certainly you're going to see on the way out of the atmosphere, which they probably thought never ended, you're going to see angels, you're going to see demons up there, and there'll be people washing their robes and different things of that kind. You'll see glorious things. I'm sure what they thought of heaven looked a lot like what's happening down here, only there was no trash or poop in the streets. It didn't turn out that way, right? It's just more places to go. That's what the universe is, more and more places to go than where you started from. So it is sort of backward to have that look, but in a way, Pocket Lager, it's their bubble. They went and stood. If you think of it, I've been taking my fiance to different places to buy things for the house and herself and shop. Well, she'll tell me she needs something, and I can take her to 10 stores that sell it, maybe, right? That are local to me, local to us. So it's, what do you want? If you want to believe in a God, well, what else do you want with this God? Because if I take you to the Walmart Supercenter, you can't buy lumber there, but you can get some comfy chairs or a stool to sit on and some organizing racks. By the way, they sell the same things at the 99-cent only store, where prices are generally lower, but it might be a bit of a treasure hunt sometimes. If we go to the Walmart Supercenter, I can also get my oil changed and put tires on my car, but we can't do that at Macy's.
Right.
If you want a nice suit, we're not going to Walmart for you to get a nice woman's suit. Sort of lots of things have their purpose, and Christianity sort of does what most other religions, well, I don't know most, but many other religions do. It's not as unique as they hoped. You know what it's like? It is like going to Nordstrom or Macy's and seeing this really great looking expensive outfit from Bebe, right? You see it there and like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And then you see the price, but you get it anyway. Only to go thrift store shopping and you find the same exact thing with the tag still on it, and you're paying $18 for it. It's the same thing. You just bought it in a less classy store, but it's the same thing.
Today, that they say that the tomb was empty.
And people were also saying at the time that the disciples stole the body from the tomb.
Exactly.
In order to dispute these claims, Matthew says in chapter 28 that the tomb guards saw Jesus, a guy who was just crucified for sedition, and these guards just let him get away for some reason. And then some priests paid the guards to lie and say that the disciples stole the body. I'm skeptical that these guards ever even really existed, because if they did, no matter which version of the story you believe, these were some of the world's shittiest guards. Either they saw the guy whom their superiors just punished for sedition get up and walk away and didn't stop him, or they just let Jesus' friends come and raid his tomb. Was the tomb being guarded by Paul Blart? And if these guards were paid to say that the disciples stole the body, did nobody ask them why they just let that happen? I hope they were bribed an awful lot of money, because they definitely would have gotten fired from their tomb guarding jobs if they went around telling people that the disciples stole the body and that they just stood there and let them get away with it.
Wait, pause it. Wait, did you have a thought right here?
No, go ahead. Yeah, but go ahead.
Okay. If you're one of these priests, wouldn't it be smarter to realize, wait a minute, there's something powerful going on with this Jesus guy? I'm going to convert. I'm going to go talk to him. I'm going to go ask him questions. This guy's onto something. Not just on something, but onto something. We don't read about those priests converting. Shouldn't we? Isn't that a natural thing for people to do?
Right.
Again, let's go back to my example with Rocky. If Rocky is definitively proving he has or has been given, either way it's the same, this power to heal people, it's true no matter even if people doubt it. Excuse me, it's just true. But if you see proof, if you are a witness to proof, meaning the guards are telling you Jesus got up, like, dude, it just happened like 48 minutes ago. That Jesus guy, he walked out of there. He rolled the stone away himself, and he walked out of the tomb. No kidding. No kidding. How do I know you're not lying? There he is. He's limping down the road right there. Okay, well, let's go talk to him. Because he's got something going on. We don't read about those priests converting. We don't. We should. In my opinion, if what he's doing is that powerful in real time, we should be able to read about it.
So for me, like the older I get, the more I look at it. This is part of the. It definitely didn't happen because of how unrealistic the story is. If there was a real resurrection, that would be it. In other words, the story would be real, be so realistic, but the only unrealistic detail would just be that resurrection. Instead, none of this is how it works. So one character that really bothers me in the Bible is Pontius Pilate.
Mm-hmm.
Pontius Pilate is known in history, and Pontius Pilate is known to be an especially cruel procurator.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way the Pontius Pilate in history is going, I find no fault with this man, but you guys really want to crucify him? All right, we'll go ahead and crucify him. Oh, what? He rose from the dead and escaped the crucifixion? Oh, that's fine. Like it when you read about Pontius Pilate, you just go, there's no way that's the character in the Bible. There's just no way. And now we know a bit of something about crucifixions. We know the bodies were left on the cross as a sign of humiliation and as a scare tactic, a deterrent, is the word I'm looking for. We know that they were buried in mass graves. How much more of a dramatic scene would that even be for someone to raise out of a mass grave, right? And instead, we just get all these unrealistic details that make it like the people telling the story were less familiar with the practices of the time. Oh, he's in a tomb. Some rich guy, yeah. So like a rich guy who's probably politically had consequences to his decision decided to bury an insurrectionist in his private family crypt. Okay, but then it was guarded by Roman soldiers. So the Roman soldiers were guarding the politically connected Jewish guy's family crypt. But then the stone was rolled away, but the guards were there. But then the women didn't. Like none of these details make sense at all.
Right. Yeah, the Bible doesn't tell us that Frosty the Snowman's hat was in that tomb. And they put it on Jesus, and that's why it came back. Hold on one second. My future wife's here.
Sure. All right, let's roll some tape.
Point of even having someone guard a tomb. Did the authorities anticipate that the disciples might try to steal the body? Did they routinely post people to guard tombs? How long is a tomb supposed to be guarded? Forever? The very idea of tomb guards seems very fishy to me.
Exactly.
And that they really did experience Jesus in a new, transformed physicality, which seemed capable of inhabiting in both heaven and earth and moving easily between the two. That's a very strange thing.
Yeah, it's a nonsensical thing.
And Jesus never talked about that in advance.
He never talked about rising from the dead after being crucified in advance either. He purportedly talked about being unalived in the near future, but given that he was trying to overthrow the Roman occupation of Judea, you don't have to be Nostradamus to see that coming.
And nor, as far as we can tell, did any of the Jewish writers who wrote about resurrection. So there's all sorts of new things which come out in the resurrection stories and Paul's theories about resurrection, for
So-
which they were unprepared,
so
and
this
for
is
which
the-
theories like that of
So that's what's interesting about the crucifixion. That's why I asked that question at the top about, what did he have to be? Sorry, that's what's interesting about the resurrection, and did he have to be resurrected from the beginning? Because there's gonna be a lot of ifs, y'all. Because I don't even know where I'm at on the historicity of Jesus. But if he was a real person, then for me that would mean certainly he was not resurrected. Whether or not he was crucified, I wouldn't even know about that, right? So that's where we get interesting, because he has to go from a real story of a person who presumably lived and died, right? I don't know what else. Let's say maybe was crucified. Okay, that could be a noteworthy way of how he met his end. But somewhere by the time them Gospels are written a few decades later, he's the magic guy who rose from the dead or was elected by God and all of this type of stuff. And so what's interesting to me is just the celebrity of it. There had to be something about who he was or what his story was about that isn't the resurrection, right? That made him the hero to hang the resurrection attribute onto, right? Because if I'm, and again, I'm not sure if Jesus really existed, but if I'm going to say, all right, Jesus really existed, right? And then I'm going to say, okay, fine, Jesus really existed and was really crucified. Okay, well, by the time a few decades later, they're making him God. There had to be something else about him that is worth telling, because it wasn't that he's God and it wasn't that he's resurrected, because I don't believe those things. So that's kind of why it's interesting, because it's almost like he had some real effect such that his story was passed down and being told. And it could just be something as simple as he was a real, if we're supposed to believe the Bible, holds memories and all of this or whatever we're told, then maybe it's like, he was kind of patterned himself some sort of revolutionary, had a message that was bold in its opposition to the Roman Empire, and maybe it kind of caught on or something. I don't know, but it does make you wonder.
Just remember, let's take the Stephen King story, Pet Sematary. None of it has to be true. Absolutely no detail as far as an individual's life needs to be true. We know they were Native Americans. We know they had burial grounds. We know their semi-trucks. We know their roads. We know their families. We know little children die. We know, there's all these things which we know occur and will occur within your lifetime. Some things occur before your lifetimes. We know there are stories about ghosts. We know there are stories about, the Jesus story, people coming back from the dead. We have all these story elements.
Yes.
And they coalesce into something. They mean something.
Yes.
Pet Sematary story is designed to intrigue you, to shock you, and to scare you, and to make you pay your money to enjoy it. The Gospels may not have started with the idea of collecting loads and loads of money, but it does. But all those other elements already existed either in the real world or in other stories. The entire thing, back to front, could have been made up by the Stephen King of their time. It could have been written by some rhapsode. It could be based on true events. It could be that this Jesus was a real guy, and later better writers became Christians and rewrote the story and did things to make it more compelling. Or they took a collection of legends, right? They had a stack of papers about Jesus, Even Paul talks about somebody bringing him some scrolls, right?
Right.
Is that when they sit down and wrote the Gospels? Is that what was the genesis of that?
Right.
Don't know, and we never will know, more than likely.
Right.
So I think it's just something to keep in mind. It may be entirely false.
Mm.
It's not entirely true.
Mm.
We know
Yeah,
that.
definitely.
It's not
Definitely.
entirely true because they're
Definitely.
inconsistent.
It is. It could be entirely
So-
wrong, and I see some of that in there, right? Because when you, especially when you get removed from a situation historically, you're not living exactly in this time. Then you start to. It's easier to do that, right? Because there's no one around to dispute the details. But we probably think John the Baptist, right, was a real, celebrity religious figure at the time.
Real guy.
I think Pontius Pilate was probably known, right? Like the way I think of it is there's no Hitler then, right? Hitler hadn't been born yet.
They had one in a way, because Herod ordered all those babies killed, right? The slaughter of the innocents.
Yeah,
So
and
he
I think Pontius Pilate is serving like a contemporary, like in a similar type of role, right? He's
the modern day villain.
Yes, because they didn't have a, well, it's just like Hitler is the worst person ever, whatever. So Pontius Pilate and Herod, or whoever, like these were the big evil, big meanies of their era. So if you have this guy who was, even John the Baptist said he was the one, and then he suffered under Pontius, right? It just creates this fantastic story. I guess at least at the time.
It's a story.
Yeah.
And even the rather different theories of Dale Allison simply don't address.
So you believe that Jesus raised Jairus' daughter from the dead, and that he raised Lazarus from the dead, and that when Jesus was crucified, the tombs were opened and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised, and that being apocalypticists, the disciples anticipated that many more people would be raised on Judgment Day, but you also believe that his disciples were unprepared for Jesus' resurrection?
It's very interesting that if you look at the Gospels, you'll discover that resurrection is hardly mentioned in the Gospels outside the actual resurrection accounts at the end.
Except for the people Jesus brought back from the dead and the countless people who rose from their graves and wandered around Jerusalem during the crucifixion.
And to that extent, they're much more like Second Temple Jewish literature. Resurrection is there, but it's not a big theme. But in early Christianity, from Paul onwards, it's huge. It's enormous.
From Paul onwards would include the Gospels, given that they were written mostly, if not entirely, after Paul died. So was the resurrection huge from Paul onwards, or is it barely mentioned in the Gospels? These statements seem to be somewhat in tension with one another.
So that's
like
the first
most
thing.
of
The
what he
second
says.
thing, is that resurrection has split into two. And it's, instead of it being everybody at the end of time,
what is this?
Jesus.
What is his deal? Is he even a real Christian? Does N.T. Wright believe this nonsense?
He's a priest, or he was a priest, if I remember right.
So do you think he's just so steeped in the lore, he's deluded himself into buying this? It just gets hard to believe that people that are working this hard at it actually are genuinely believing that it's true. Like, oh my goodness.
he's sitting in a very nice chair that would make a lovely dress, an old lady. He obviously made a crap ton of money off this stuff, obviously. So the best way to keep that money train rolling is to keep the delusion alive, keep people believing it. Oh my gosh, folks, we got all this proof, blah, 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 blah. If this was 2,000 years ago and we were listening to some guy tell us about the evidence for Zeus, he's using extremely similar arguments. Well, if the stories about Zeus weren't true, we wouldn't have this as evidence, and there wouldn't be a temple here, and there wouldn't be a statue here made in his likeness, which was inspired because Zeus appeared to the artist. Blah, blah. You'd be hearing stuff like this all the time about all the various gods. If we were out in the freaking African bush listening to the Bantu tell stories about their ancient gods, 2,000 years ago, antelope and jaguar and and they'd have all these great stories, and our eyes would grow big because it sounded just as much horse crap as what NT Wright is laying down.
Yeah, see, this
And
is
just
kind of what I wonder. Go ahead.
no, I think, look, what he's doing is that you hear the example a lot from atheists of Spider-Man is not real just because New York is real. The
Right.
Daily Planet is not a real newspaper at that time. There might be one now because of licensing, but it wasn't necessarily where Peter Parker worked and he was Spider, right? Superman worked at a newspaper too. Do you have to be a superhero to work at a newspaper? Is it a requirement?
Yeah, I actually think in the end, history is going to turn on Christianity. What I'm thinking is there's something about religions of the past or distant religions where they sort of become interesting to us almost as playthings. We're fascinated, we're curious, da 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 da. But if people lived under the reign of cults, um, run by those particular religions at the time, they may not have seen it as just a curiosity, right? It would be either they were with it and they were you got to go sacrifice at the temple or da, 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 or they were secretly like being crushed by the tyranny of Odysseus believers or whatever the heck it is. um and I wonder that about Christianity. Like, I think right now we're just living in such a time that, to me, Christianity really contributes to some darkness. It's hard for me to put it up with those other myths. Even like when I think of something like Spider-Man, or I'm always happy to like hear more about superheroes and comic book characters or whatever, because while there are certainly devoted followers, there's no real cult that like is oppressing people and trying to take over governments in the name of Spider-Man.
Right.
Um, and so I do wonder how we'll see Christianity, what I'm fingers crossed, some time from now, when it's sort of a thing that humanity looks back on. If we get to that point where humanity actually looks back on Christianity, how will it be seen? On one hand, will it just be, man, people were really silly, um, believing that this Trinity, that there was three gods, but really there were one God, but the God had to sacrifice himself to fulfill the, or whatever. Or is there going to be much more sinister side to it, where we sort of look back at it like a terrorist organization or something?
I don't know. It remains to be seen. I think the idea that I guess that, look, it was a rough patch in human history where billions of people over hundreds of centuries or tens of centuries or whatever
Whatever, yeah.
really felt that it was an absolutely real thing that gods existed the way they described them, right? Raining down fire from the sky, living up in the clouds. Again, I'll say it again. Sorry, I know we have a lot of devoted viewers. I'm going to say it one more time. About the sweetest, most innocent thing I can say about the time where I did believe in a God was on my first plane ride ever from Fort Wayne, Indiana to Los Angeles, when we breached the clouds in the plane. I looked out the window and I said, I wonder where heaven is.
Yep.
I'm sure there are Christians taking that, their first plane ride today, that look out the window and wonder where heaven is. Where's all the sweetness and the music and the streets of as if they were gold, the amber colored streets? Where are where's all that? You don't see it. Maybe the amber that they thought, in Revelation, the streets of gold, was just the sunlight shining through the clouds, making the sky glow some really pretty color as they looked up from the ground in the desert. Maybe it's not in another dimension. Maybe it's not a real place that you can go to and frolic and be on your knees praising God 24/7 forever. Maybe it's not that. Maybe it's a collection. Maybe it's a collection of ideas because life on earth got really tough. You have these different societies trying to oppress yours, and you just want to be free. And maybe it's not coming. So you make up a story to relieve the pain of your people, telling them about a better place where their troubles are over and their enemies are all crushed, right? Whether it be Babylon being killed, whether it be the people of Tyre being killed and Tyre being taken over, whether you're free in the streets, not the old Jerusalem, but the new one that descended from heaven that was completely untainted by the blood and suffering of your people. Yeah, let's look forward to that.
Absolutely.
It could be that simple.
First, and other people later.
Has this dude never even read the Gospels? Given that Jesus raised people from the dead before he himself even died, how do the Gospels portray resurrection as Jesus first?
And the third thing particularly is that it's a transformed physicality. And that is unprecedented. It's not a resuscitation. People often say dismissively, "Oh, resurrection isn't about the resuscitation of a corpse. It's a spiritual idea." And as Steve Davis, an American philosopher of religion, says, I actually don't know anyone who's argued the resurrection was the resuscitation of a corpse, but skeptics like to wave that around in order then to say those are the only two alternatives.
That sounds almost Docetist. Docetists were people who believed that Jesus was never really human, but rather he was God projecting the illusion of a human. This was quickly condemned as a heresy on the grounds that a central idea in Christianity is that Jesus died for our sins, and if he wasn't really a flesh and blood human, he didn't really die. Wouldn't there also be a bit of a theological problem with the idea that Jesus' resurrection was not really the physical resuscitation of a material human body? Were Lazarus and Jairus' daughter not resuscitated human bodies either?
And it's clear in the New Testament that this is a major new feature, that it's a body, but it's a transformed body. Those are the real central things.
Transformed how exactly? Given that Jesus shows off his wounds to convince Thomas that it's really him, it sounds like his body was pretty zombie-like. It's described as looking like you would expect a recently crucified corpse to look. He still has the holes in his hands and the spear wound in his side.
Yeah, and that's an essential problem in Christianity altogether, because like Steph always says, you can break it down to the Apostles' Creed, and in the Apostles' Creed, they believe in the resurrection of the body. Well, which body? The one you died with? Because I'm probably not going to want that back. Is it your prime body? Like what it
raised incorruptible. That's what Paul says. Raised incorruptible.
Yeah, and then you would assume Jesus was raised like that, but again, no, actually he was raised with nail wounds still intact. And
yeah, maybe because it was a play and they couldn't wash off the dye fast enough for the third act when Jesus comes back to life.
Yeah,
it can be something real simple. That's how they solve the problem. Just leave the wounds in. Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
but he's supposed to be raised from the dead.
Yeah.
So these people don't care.
And I'm thinking of a little there's a little little hut house, and that the audience can see on one side there's a door and people walk in through the door, but for some reason on the other side of the room there's this really high stack of sacks of stuff and things, right? But they can use it because then Jesus can walk through the wall. He can just, you know, they could, it's so real because he just he just walks through the wall and they just get it, and it's
Did you see that? Ancient special effects, yeah. Ancient visual effects. Congratulations. Look, I say this halfway joking, only halfway. It could have started out as a community theater project. It really could have. Like I said, there's that story, and I'm pretty sure it's in Diodorus, where he talks about it. You know, that maybe it's, I don't know, it could be Herodotus, that epiphany of Osiris. And when people heard that story and saw that story, so many of them believe it had to be true. They're told it's fiction. It had to be true. They wouldn't accept it not being true. We could have the very same thing with Jesus. It was all a show. It could be that simple. It was all a show.
Yeah.
And now it is huge money earning enterprise.
It's also crazy at this point. It's honestly hard to believe that there's any history, or at least any history in what we've got left, because it's all just so fantastical and inconsistent with itself. I almost, you know, to me, the title of today was almost a joke, you know, why the resurrection was probably invented. You know, it's just, you know, it's getting harder and harder and harder for me to believe that people actually believe this stuff. I know they do, but there's really something changing in my brain where it's like I'm just becoming really distant from that belief, and it's not jiving the way it used to. And it's like, really, like, you really, I want to ask people, like, just like you really believe Jesus rose from the dead, huh? You know, I always want to say, like, I always say, so there's like two questions I ask, and they're essentially the same question, but I always say, so Jesus was alive, then he was dead, then he was alive again, and you know, and they say yes to that, I'll say, so you think that's a thing that actually happened in the history of this planet? You know, like, it's just really hard to wrap my head around.
Well, I think if you want to have some fun with the believer, you just stay right there. Just stay in that vein of questioning. So how long was he out for? 3 days. Okay, so he was dead for 3 days. And that's like Jonah. Jonah was dead for 3 days. And then the great fish spat him out on the shore. Okay, so like when he was dead, what did he do? Was he just sitting there, his corpse rotting, you know? Did it bubble up and his skin get all nasty and the bugs creep in and start to eat him, you know? And literally ask them questions like that and have them tell you what their interpretation is. Because maybe in doing that, in that little interrogation, which maybe that was a Muslim viewer was trying to do, is just get us to endlessly answer questions in hopes of finding a weakness in our argument that would make us realize, oh my gosh, his point of view or her point of view about Islam is superior to our point of view, and maybe we should consider adopting what they, you know, espouse. Maybe that is the better way. And that might be that track that person was leading us down to go. I don't know.
Yeah. That's it's definitely, yeah, it's just unfortunate because when you can see it coming, you're just like, I don't even want to bother. We already know where this is going. It's not going where you want it to go.
I don't mind doing the Pine Creek embrace the trap kind of thing. It's okay, because for me, their trap is unlikely to be as good as my arguments against it. I'll take it, dude. Whatever you got. Because before we're done, I will then look at you and say very succinctly, here's how you can prove your point. I'm not going to ask you to prove it your way. I'm going to give you the criteria, and I want you to prove it. So I happen to believe there is no God. Okay, that's a belief. I cannot prove to you that there is no God, but tell me about yours, and I'll set them up for failure. right? You give me the stipulations, you give me the parameters for your God existing, and I'll throw him a little test, and he can't solve it right in front of us.
Right.
Why wouldn't he? You know, still got the post-it notes. They still drop. Still no Gospel of John filled out on here. He's had over an hour to do that, right? Didn't happen, and it never will.
Right.
All right, small. I couldn't put the Gospel of John on there. It's just not gonna happen.
Yep.
So I guess I'm like the Cyrano de Bergerac character. Bring me no mortal men. Bring me giants. You go right ahead. You march them in with their God beliefs, and we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I'm with you. Their arguments are definitely not going to be effective, and definitely NT Wright's arguments weren't effective. I still think the resurrection was made up. Nothing about his arguments, I guess we'll call them that, has changed my mind. In fact, he just looked like a big man baby who who can't accept that this is just a fairy tale. This is just a story, NT Wright. It's just a story. It's time to get over it.
What may be happening? This guy, I think his name is Irvin Finkel. This guy knows a lot about ancient society, like the Sumerians or ancient Babylon and Egypt. Just a really sharp guy. And to hear him speak, his enthusiasm is contagious. It's wonderful. I don't know if he's been asked, do you think this stuff is true? Like these people, do you believe what they believe? If he were asked if he believed in Ra and Isis and Horus or Marduk, he'd probably say no, but it's such great fun to discuss these things. Maybe a lot of what we see in Christian apologists is it is great fun to have these talks. And if people stop believing, it's going to be harder to find people who listen to you have that talk and those discussions with other scholars. It gets harder because you don't have the support anymore, right? No one's paying William Lane Craig $40,000 to come and speak at their church anymore. No one's paying Michael Icona $7,000 to go speak at their church anymore because there are no more churches to go to. Those guys are just sitting doing Minecraft YouTube videos now because they can't make a buck off Jesus, but they still feel like talking to strangers. Yes.
Well, all right, gang, that's going to do it for this episode of Hot Program. It's been a good one. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. There are links in the descriptions to both our channels. Please give us a subscribe and a like, and those shares are clutch. If you're watching later on, leave us a comment. We're going to head to Gather for the remainder of the evening, and that's where you can find us in our virtual headquarters when we're not live. So there's a link in the description, says link up with the gang. You can come hang out with us and Gather. Otherwise, be good to yourselves
and each other.